King Charles has just got his revenge on Meghan Markle on his state tour of the USA. And this is so beautiful.
Martha, are you going with Charles, with King Charles over with Chuck? Oh, I love that. Look how cool you are. Not Charles, but Chuck.
And he looks great, Charles.
Yes, he does.
Charles looks great, and Camilla looks fabulous.
Do you ever give them any house tips, any decorating tips?
I need it from them.
Thanks, Martha. Tell us how it is. Ciao.
In the gilded world of monarchy, power is rarely exercised through confrontation. It is exercised through presence, through optics, through the careful, deliberate curation of moments that speak louder than any statement could. And in the spring of 2025, as King Charles III and Queen Camilla touched down in New York City for what would become one of the most talked about royal visits in recent memory, those moments were not accidental. They were engineered. Every photograph, every invitation, every name on that guest list. What unfolded across 24 extraordinary hours in one of the world's most powerful cities was not simply a diplomatic tour. It was a masterclass in royal strategy.
Camilla are able to have relationships with people that Meghan would only dreams of having relationships with. She has been outed and just pushed aside by every...
A quiet, devastating, and brilliantly executed act of institutional authority reasserting itself against those who had spent years trying to dismantle it. And at the center of it all, hidden in plain sight, was a message so pointed, so precisely aimed, that most of the mainstream media missed it entirely. To understand what happened in New York, you must first understand what was happening simultaneously, thousands of miles away. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, were not standing idly by as the King of England captured international headlines. According to multiple sources within royal and media circles, the couple had orchestrated a calculated media intervention designed to do one thing, and one thing only: pull attention away from the royal visit and redirect it toward themselves. The vehicle for this intervention was People magazine, one of America's most widely read celebrity publications. At precisely the moment when People magazine might have been expected to feature King Charles and Queen Camilla on its cover, a historic, once-in-a-generation image of a reigning British monarch conducting a state visit to the United States, the publication instead ran a sweeping, deeply sympathetic profile of Harry and Meghan. The timing was not coincidental. It was surgical. The profile painted an intimate portrait of life in Montecito, California. Warm, grounded, purposeful, and quietly triumphant. It spoke of school runs and family weekends, of loyal friendships and meaningful causes, of a couple who had chosen freedom over institution and were thriving as a result. It quoted staffers who praised Meghan's warmth.
And it just is, I think, a slap in Meghan's face to see that, here she is trying to make headway with certain people that she can surround herself with, and she just can't do it. But, the real royals can, and it really shows.
It quoted friends who admired her resilience. It described Harry as emotionally anchored, surrounded by a close-knit group of fellow fathers, connected in content. To the casual reader, it read like a redemption arc. To those who had followed the couple's trajectory closely, it read like something else entirely, a carefully constructed counter-narrative, released at the precise moment it could cause the most disruption. Royal observers and commentators, who had spent years tracking the Sussex media strategy, recognized the fingerprints immediately. This was not journalism. This was positioning, and its target was unmistakable. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn, because while Harry and Meghan were executing their media strategy from 3,000 miles away, King Charles was quietly executing one of his own, and his weapon of choice was not a press release. It was a dinner invitation. Among the guests personally invited to attend the King's Trust International Gala Dinner in New York City was Martha Stewart, entrepreneur, television personality, lifestyle icon, and one of the most recognizable women in American cultural life. On the surface, the invitation seemed entirely unremarkable. Martha Stewart is a prominent figure. The event was high profile. The connection made sense. But for those who understood the deeper context, the symbolism was staggering. Because Martha Stewart and Meghan Markle share a history, one that had played out publicly, uncomfortably, and with considerable consequence for Meghan's carefully constructed image as a lifestyle authority. The origins of their conflict lie in a pasta recipe. Specifically, a one-pot pasta dish that appeared in the first series of Meghan's Netflix lifestyle show, With Love, Meghan. Food writers and culinary observers quickly noted a striking resemblance between Meghan's dish and a recipe that had long been associated with Martha Stewart, a resemblance so close and so unacknowledged that it sparked widespread accusations of plagiarism. Meghan offered no credit, no acknowledgement, no attribution of any kind. Martha Stewart's response was measured but unmistakable. She updated her original recipe online with a pointed clarification, labeling it the original and the best. It was a quiet rebuke, but in the world of lifestyle branding, where originality and authenticity are everything, it landed with considerable force. The episode cast a shadow over Meghan's credibility precisely when she was attempting to establish herself as a serious voice in the lifestyle space. And now, months later, Martha Stewart was not attending Meghan's events. She was attending the King's. The footage that emerged from that evening captured Martha Stewart in remarkable spirits, animated, enthusiastic, and openly delighted to be in the company of the British monarch. She spoke warmly of King Charles, noting his excellent humor and form despite the demands of international travel. Her Instagram post afterward was effusive, describing the gala as a celebration of the King's Trust International and its mission to support young people and their entrepreneurial ambitions. The event, she wrote, reflected everything that meaningful public service looks like: purposeful, generous, and entirely devoid of self-promotion. The contrast with the People magazine profile was not lost on observers. Here was one of Meghan's most prominent adversaries in the lifestyle world, not merely attending the King's event, but endorsing it, celebrating it, posting about it to her millions of followers, and doing so on the very same news cycle in which Meghan had attempted to dominate the headlines. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla was delivering a performance of her own, and it was one that would draw immediate comparisons to everything Meghan had spent years trying to build. At the New York Public Library, one of the world's most celebrated cultural institutions, Camilla hosted a star-studded literary and cultural event that assembled a guest list of breathtaking stature. Among those present was Sarah Jessica Parker, the actress and cultural icon whose connection to New York City borders on the mythological. Also in attendance was Anna Wintour, the legendary editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine, one of the most powerful and notoriously selective figures in global fashion and culture. Wintour's presence alone would have been remarkable, but it was a small, seemingly inconsequential gesture that drew particular attention from royal observers. Anna Wintour removed her sunglasses. For those unfamiliar with Wintour's public persona, this detail may seem trivial. It is not. The sunglasses are a signature, a barrier, a shield, a statement of deliberate distance from the world around her. She rarely removes them in public. She had done so previously, on record, at the investiture of the late Queen Elizabeth II, and now she did so again, in the company of Queen Camilla. The symbolism, to those paying attention, was profound. The broader significance of Camilla's New York evening extended far beyond celebrity attendance, though. It struck at the very heart of a narrative that Harry and Meghan had worked for years to establish, the idea that in leaving the royal family, they had not abandoned cultural relevance, but claimed it, that the celebrity world, the creative world, the world of influence and cultural currency, was theirs, that the monarchy could keep its palaces and its protocols, but the Sussexes would take Hollywood. It was a compelling narrative, and for a time, it had traction. But what New York demonstrated, with quiet and devastating clarity, was that celebrity does not flow toward those who simply desire proximity to power. It flows toward the genuine article, and in room after room, evening after evening, across those 24 hours in New York City, it flowed unmistakably toward the crown. The People magazine profile, meanwhile, was unraveling under scrutiny almost from the moment it was published. Beneath its carefully polished surface lay a series of claims that royal observers, journalists, and longtime Sussex watchers found difficult to reconcile with the established record. The portrait of a harmonious Montecito household, warm, stable, and creatively thriving, ran directly counter to years of documented reporting about high staff turnover, internal tension, and the increasingly fraught relationship between the couple's professional ambitions and their actual commercial outcomes. The profile made no mention of the most significant business reversal the Sussexes had faced in recent months, the end of their headline Netflix deal. Instead, it described Meghan's lifestyle brand as being in an exploratory phase, still testing and learning. For a brand that had launched with the full marketing infrastructure of one of the world's largest streaming companies behind it, that framing struck many observers as a euphemism for something far more uncomfortable. The staffers quoted in the piece, speaking warmly of Meghan's mentorship, her creativity, her generosity, sat uneasily alongside years of reporting from other outlets describing a very different workplace dynamic. Former employees had spoken to journalists at publications, including Vanity Fair and The Hollywood Reporter, about working environments they described as difficult, unpredictable, and emotionally taxing. Some had reportedly sought professional support in the aftermath of their time with the couple. The People magazine piece did not engage with any of this directly. Instead, it offered a rebuttal by omission, presenting positive voices without acknowledging the weight of the negative record against which those voices were being deployed. The result was a piece that, for its supporters, felt validating, and for its critics, felt like confirmation of everything they already believed. Perhaps the most telling section of the profile concerned Harry himself. Buried within the optimistic framing of Montecito domesticity and Sussex solidarity was a passage that, read carefully, told a rather different story. Sources described Harry's desire for reconciliation with the royal family as genuine and ongoing. They described it as emotionally significant to him. They described Meghan as supportive of this desire, as someone who lets Harry lead on royal matters, who would never put herself at odds with his wishes in that area. On first reading, this might appear to be evidence of partnership and mutual respect. On second reading, it is something considerably more revealing, because what it implicitly concedes is that the reconciliation has not happened, that it remains incomplete, uncertain, and painfully out of reach, that after years of public rupture, private negotiation, and carefully worded statements from both sides, Harry's relationship with his father and his brother remains fractured, and that the fracture, whatever the public narrative might suggest, is not healing at any meaningful pace. The relationship with Prince William remains the most acute wound of all. Royal sources who spoke to People magazine were blunt on this point. The divide between Harry and William is described not merely as difficult, but as potentially permanent. For William, what Harry and Meghan have done, the book, the interviews, the documentaries, the sustained campaign of public grievance, is described as non-negotiable, something he cannot and will not countenance, regardless of whatever private contact may exist between Harry and his father. Those who understand William's character describe a man of considerable patience, but equally considerable principle, someone who draws lines carefully but, once drawn, does not erase them. The question of whether Harry and William will ever meaningfully reconcile is described by those closest to the situation not as a matter of time, but as a matter of fundamental incompatibility between what Harry has done and what William is able to forgive. Queen Elizabeth's former press secretary, Dickie Arbiter, speaking with characteristic directness, captured the institutional perspective with precision. What Harry and Meghan are doing, he suggested, is not merely unhelpful to reconciliation efforts. It is actively counterproductive. Every media intervention, every carefully timed profile, every attempt to position themselves as parallel royals conducting their own version of public service, each of these actions pushes the possibility of genuine repair further away. And the People magazine profile, timed as it was to coincide with Charles and Camilla's American tour, represented yet another entry in what has become a long and damaging ledger. Royal biographer Sally Bedell Smith, who has deep and long-standing connections within Buckingham Palace, was equally unambiguous. The couple, she suggested, are pushing the envelope, and in doing so, they are making genuine reconciliation not easier but considerably harder. Set against this backdrop of fractured relationships and strategic media maneuvering, the Washington, D.C. portion of Charles and Camilla's visit takes on additional resonance. The political dimension of the tour, meetings with senior American officials, engagements with diplomatic and governmental figures, the delicate navigation of the transatlantic relationship at a moment of considerable geopolitical complexity, was handled, by all accounts, with considerable skill. The king demonstrated precisely the kind of calm, experienced statesmanship that his long years as heir had prepared him for. Camilla moved through formal engagements with the ease and warmth that those who had underestimated her for years found genuinely difficult to dismiss. Together, they presented a united front that was neither performative nor strained. It was simply effective. And effectiveness, in the context of the sustained narrative assault they had faced from the Sussex camp throughout the visit, was itself a kind of triumph. But it was New York that delivered the defining images. And it was New York that made the underlying argument most powerfully. The argument was not made in speeches or press conferences or carefully worded statements. It was made in moments. Martha Stewart, laughing and animated, heading into a royal gala. Anna Wintour, sunglasses removed, in the company of the Queen. Sarah Jessica Parker, walking alongside Camilla at one of New York's most storied cultural institutions. These were not accidental associations. They were the natural consequence of what happens when genuine authority enters a room. The people who matter, the people who have options, who choose their associations carefully and guard their reputations jealously. They gravitate toward the authentic. They have no interest in adjacency to aspiration. They want proximity to the real thing. And in New York, in those 24 hours, the real thing was wearing a crown. For Meghan Markle, watching all of this unfold from California, the optics must have been extraordinarily difficult to process. She had spent years constructing an identity as a global lifestyle icon, a humanitarian force, a cultural figure of independent standing. She had insisted, publicly and repeatedly, that stepping back from royal duties had not diminished her relevance, but expanded it, that she could exist at the intersection of celebrity, commerce, and cause in a way that was uniquely powerful and uniquely hers. But what New York demonstrated, with a clarity that no amount of carefully placed magazine profiles could obscure, was that the cultural world she had claimed as her own did not, in fact, belong to her. The relationships she had cultivated, the friendships, the associations, the carefully managed social adjacencies, did not constitute the deep, organic, mutually respectful connections that the people around Charles and Camilla demonstrated so effortlessly. They were transactional, and the people she needed most could see the difference. The timing of the People magazine profile, its release during the King's American visit, its conspicuous absence of any reference to the tour itself, its relentless positivity about a couple whose commercial and personal fortunes had been the subject of considerably less flattering coverage elsewhere, was not lost on the publication's own readership. People magazine had long cultivated a loyal following among royal enthusiasts, readers who had followed the British monarchy through decades of drama and transformation, and who turned to the publication for coverage they trusted. The decision to lead with a Sussex profile at precisely the moment when a historic royal visit to American soil was generating international attention was not merely a scheduling choice. It was a statement of editorial priorities, and for many of that loyal readership, it was a statement they found difficult to accept. The week, taken in its entirety, amounted to something more than the successful royal tour. It amounted to a referendum, informal, unannounced, but unmistakable, on the question of where genuine royal authority resides in the 21st century. The answer that emerged from New York was not ambiguous. It did not require interpretation. It was written in every photograph, every guest list, every moment of warmth and laughter and unforced human connection that the cameras captured across those 24 hours. The crown had come to America, and America, or at least the part of America that matters most to those who had bet against it, had responded, not with indifference, not with obligation, but with genuine, unreserved welcome, the kind that cannot be manufactured, the kind that cannot be purchased, the kind that, ultimately, can only be earned. What happens next between Harry and the royal family remains genuinely uncertain. The People magazine profile, whatever its limitations as journalism, did at least confirm what many had long suspected, that Harry's desire for some form of reconciliation is real, that it matters deeply to him, and that it remains painfully unresolved. The question of whether that reconciliation is possible, whether the bridge between what Harry has done and what his family can forgive is one that anyone is willing to build, is one that New York did nothing to answer. If anything, it sharpened it, because every moment that Charles and Camilla spent demonstrating the enduring power and relevance of the institution that Harry walked away from is another reminder of what that walk cost him. And every moment that Meghan spends in the pages of sympathetic magazines, constructing alternative realities about Montecito warmth and lifestyle brand momentum, is another indication that the distance between where they are and where they might have been is growing, not shrinking. The Martha Stewart invitation will be remembered as one of the more quietly devastating moments of the entire visit, not because it was cruel, not because it was petty, but because it was so perfectly judged. It required no explanation. It generated no controversy. It simply placed, in the most visible possible setting, a figure whose history with Meghan Markle spoke volumes, and let the optics do the rest. That is how power operates when it is genuinely secure in itself. It does not need to explain. It does not need to justify. It does not need to respond. It simply acts. And in acting, it says everything. The week that King Charles and Queen Camilla spent in America will be studied for years, not merely as a diplomatic milestone, but as a turning point. A moment when the fog of narrative warfare briefly cleared, And what lay beneath it was unmistakable. The monarchy, battered and questioned and written off by so many for so long, had arrived in the most powerful city in the world, and it had reminded everyone, in the most elegant way imaginable, exactly who it is.